Welcome to Coruzant Technologies, home of the Digital Executive Podcast.
Welcome to the Digital Executive. Today's guest is Chelsea Mandel, founder and managing director of Ascension Advisory. Chelsea oversees all sale, leaseback transactions, and corporate real estate advisory assignments, partnering with business owners, private equity firms, and other financial sponsors in structuring innovative solutions for their corporate real estate globally. In less than a decade, Chelsea has established herself as a pioneering force in corporate real estate finance due to a relentless work ethic and unparalleled transaction volume across real estate asset classes and global markets. Upon graduating magna cum laude from Dartmouth College with a degree in economics, Chelsea joined the acquisitions team at Starwood Capital Group. She quickly thrived as a sole woman in her acquisitions team of 52 investment professionals, gaining expertise in underwriting and deal negotiations. Based on this success, Chelsea was recruited to join New York City's based New Mountain Capital to build out its sale-leaseback platform, one of the first net lease funds of its kind among middle-market private equity firms. Chelsea was instrumental in this role, raising $533 million of capital for the platform's first fund, acquiring 5+ million square feet of industrial and office space, and closing $450 million in transactions. Following her sale-leaseback investment experience, Chelsea made the transition to the advisory side of the sale-leaseback world, and to date, she has closed over $2 billion in sale-leaseback transactions. Well, good afternoon, Chelsea. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Love doing these things. Appreciate you making the time. And I know through busy schedules, you're able to hop on at this time of the evening. I know you're hailing out of the East Coast there, so I appreciate that. And Chelsea, let's jump right into your first question here. Can you describe your journey from working at Starwood Capital Group and New Mountain Capital to founding Ascension Advisory? What motivated you to take this entrepreneurial leap?
Yeah. So Starwood Capital Group was really, I would say, instrumental for me in terms of, first of all, getting me into real estate, starting on the investment side, but really just like establishing the foundation of, real estate investing. So Starwood had a tremendous training program, developed a really intense work ethic being there. So I think for me, that's really, I think the most important aspects of having worked at Starwood. When I moved to New Mountain Capital, this was totally different. This for me was really more of like, my first taste of entrepreneurship. So I was the first employee hire onto a brand new sale-leaseback fund as part of the broader private equity platform. And so it was my first experience of really like building something new. It was also where I learned, about sale-leasebacks to begin with, which obviously I've made a career out of since. So that's pretty important as well. But I really loved, the ability to be a part of something from the ground up and build a platform that, would go on to ultimately have a pretty successful and established track record and legacy. And so, I was still obviously from a sale-leaseback perspective, building, the foundations, the materials, methodologies, processes, thesis of the strategy. But for me, it was really more about having that autonomy. I was reporting directly to the portfolio manager, and it was just giving me that sense of, entrepreneurship and being kind of a self-starter, builder, if you will. And so that's really what I got out of, I think New Mountain in terms of what led me to ultimately starting Ascension. Obviously after leaving New Mountain on the investment side, I decided to make the move to the advisory side. So I really wanted to be more in, what I would say like an eat what you kill role where, based on how hard I worked, that would kind of determine, how much I was compensated. It was kind of a very, you do this and you see that immediate reward. You work harder, you make more money, you kind of get excited about that, reward, program or process, if you will. And so I kind of found like immediate success, with that model. And after closing about, $1 billion in sale-leasebacks at that firm in my first 3 years, I was outperforming a lot of my peers. I was even doubling down on that very intense work ethic. And at some point, I just felt like it was time to go out on my own. And in April of 2022, we launched Ascension Advisory. So here we are.
Hey, amazing story. Really do appreciate that, Chelsea. And, the fact that sometimes you get put in a position that makes you rethink some things. And I know the autonomy that you had at New Mountain Capital obviously kind of gave you that, hey, I might be able to do this on my own. And I really love these stories. We have a lot of entrepreneurs on the podcast, so I appreciate that. Chelsea, you're known for structuring innovative solutions for corporate real estate. Can you share some example of these creative strategies and their impact on your clients?
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of like the creative piece of sale leasebacks, we've had a lot of success in, I would say, two main areas. One being the ability to creatively structure sale leasebacks as acquisition financing for entrepreneurs and financial sponsors, private equity firms, whoever, in terms of their acquisitions of operating companies. So when they're buying businesses that are more asset intensive and have company owned real estate, we're setting up sale leasebacks really as part of the cap stack. And that's kind of a newer, model, especially, in areas outside of the United States. Like it's still not really something that, we're able to do in, Canada or Mexico or Europe. So I do think it's early days in terms of utilizing the sale leaseback as, M&A financing, but it's really unique because it involves a lot of moving parts. There's a ton of, different pieces that have to kind of fit perfectly in terms of timeline and mechanics and, parties speaking with one another and collaborating to make sure that everything comes together perfectly and in a timely fashion so that the day of closing, everything is ready to go. And that has been, about 50% of our business in terms of sale leaseback volume. So it's definitely a key component of our offering, in terms of the services that we offer for clients. And I think from a creativity standpoint, it's certainly the area where I feel like we're exercising, the most creativity in being able to structure these deals, because a lot of the time you just have to think of, different ways to make things happen when it may not be as straightforward as just structuring a sale leaseback of existing owned property. The other example I would say, and something that we've been doing, I would say a lot more recently, has been the ability to monetize purchase options in lease agreements to generate spread for our clients through sale leasebacks. And so we have two recent examples where we worked with businesses that one of them was just acquired by a private equity firm. And as part of that acquisition, the acquirer set up a lease agreement with the former owner. And in that lease agreement, built in a purchase option. And what we were able to do was we called on, this business owner, and he knew he had the purchase option, but, wasn't aware really of the sale leaseback strategy. And so we brought the idea of, hey, let's go out and exercise your purchase option. And during that diligence period that you have to close the deal, let's run a sale leaseback process. And let's see, based on your ability to sign a long-term lease and the rents that you're willing to agree to, let's see if we can create some spread in setting up a sale leaseback so that the day you go to close the purchase option, you're actually never buying the property in the first place. You're just assigning it to the sale leaseback buyer and taking advantage of the spread between the sale leaseback price and the option price. And we did another deal very similar to that recently for an existing business where they already had a lease in place from, 2018 that had an option. We were able to make them a couple $1 million just by signing a longer lease when they knew this was a mission critical facility that they were going to be in for the long term. But the lease was coming up, on renewal in the next couple of years. And we saw significant value in putting in place a fresh 20-year lease agreement. And we were able to monetize that value for the client. And they made like almost $4 million just by signing a longer lease, executing an option, and simultaneously executing a sale leaseback.
Thank you. And I appreciate you highlighting, you unpacked quite a few examples there, but I like that the fact that you are highlighting the fact, the creativity that you put in for your clients. That's so important. And nowadays, people just want to get something across the finish line. I know timeliness is always, of high importance to clients, but you're actually looking at the issue and seeing where you might be able to make them a better return or a better business decision. So I appreciate that.
And a lot of the time for those, like, it's not even like they come to us. Like, we've gone to them and said, hey, do you have an option in your lease? If so, here's a way to monetize it. Because a lot of people, if they've never heard of a sale leaseback, like, they're not going to be thinking of, a way to do a sale leaseback to, monetize a situation that they're already in. So a lot of the time it is just like kind of lucky that we reach out to the right people who have, these circumstances that could allow us to actually add value in that way.
Thank you. Chelsea, what distinguishes Ascension Advisory from other corporate real estate advisory firms? And how do you ensure your team delivers unparalleled service and expertise to your clients?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because I really do think that the differentiators from our competitors, of our company does have to do with like the service and the expertise that we provide our clients in terms of that client experience. It's not like we're doing sale leasebacks, drastically different than our competitors, or that we're doing them in different asset types or, something else. Like, it really is just down to the service that we provide our clients and why that is so differentiated and how. I think it comes down to two things. For us, what's really important and has been really important since we started the company in 2022 was the structure of our company and the structure of our team. So we have, a very strong belief that what goes on internally carries out externally to our clients. So if you have really happy people that are collaborative, that work together, where everybody is, rowing in the same direction, your clients are going to feel that. And it's not like, the warm and fuzzies necessarily, but they're going to feel it in terms of the timeline, the productivity, how quickly your team can move and get things done, and how streamlined your process is and how streamlined your systems are. And so the way, we are set up internally, it's really more of like an investment bank where we're all one team. Everybody on the team touches every deal. You have collaboration, between the team members, and we're really run like an assembly line where, you have constant connectivity with the client throughout the entire process from A to Z. But at different points in the process, there's different, team leaders essentially running that part of, the alphabet, whether it's A to B, and then someone takes on from, C to P, whatever it is, everybody kind of runs a different part of the process, but is involved in every single deal, which is very different from our competitors who really have, for the most part, a model where everybody internally is kind of doing the same thing. It's sort of, every broker for their own, and then the brokerage firm, the house, just takes a cutoff of what everybody brings in. But what that kind of, results in is a lot of internal competition, a lot of sort of blurred lines between, who you're able to target, who you're able to prospect, who your clients are. And the client can feel it because it's just clunky. Your process is not streamlined. You're not as productive. You can't get things done as quickly. You can't get out of your own way. And compliments that we've received from our clients versus, a lot of our competitors under that model is that you can feel the collaboration between the members of our team. And it's palpable in terms of, the ability to move things forward and the ability to quarterback, something from A to Z and get to that closing quicker, more seamlessly for the client. And it's just a better, client experience. So that's really the first piece, is just that structure of how we're all set up. And that's really a big differentiator from a lot of our competitors. The second thing I would say is really just about implementation and proactivity around like technology. So the way we think about, data, outsourcing, automation, AI, I just feel like we're levels above our competitors in terms of, what they're prioritizing, where they're investing in the cap stack and, in their resources at the company. Real estate is a sleepy, old industry. And so, you literally have some of our competitors where the brokers are using like Excel sheets and Outlook for their CRM. They have no tools. They're not investing in technology. They're not investing in softwares. And it's important because even though it's, again, something that's internal, it affects the external. Because if your, team members are bogged down in, the nitty gritty of inputting data or updating spreadsheets or, doing administrative things when these things can be streamlined and improved, you're not able to deliver the best client experience for your clients because you're bogged down on other things that don't really require, your attention the way your clients do. And so what we're really able to do is kind of cut through the noise, outsource, streamline, automate the stuff that we really don't need to be doing and focus on the things that we do need to be doing, like interacting with our clients, pushing things forward from, start to finish.
Great. Thank you. And to highlight two key things for me is obviously your team's aligned on the mission, which is huge when it comes to efficient and effectiveness of getting the deal through the door. But also you're looking at leveraging some of the newer emerging tech to streamline your business even further. So I really appreciate highlighting those two things. And Chelsea, last question of the day, looking ahead, what are your long-term goals for Ascension Advisory? And how do you plan to continue evolving the company to meet the changing needs of the corporate real estate market?
Yeah, I mean, our mission is simple and it's clear. Our goal is to be the best sale-leaseback advisory firm globally, period. Like that's it. We want to be the go-to firm for private equity firms and middle market companies when they own real estate that they want to monetize through sale-leasebacks and through these other creative strategies that ultimately lead to sale-leasebacks like purchase option execution and build-to-suits and things like that. And we have a really nice business set up in North America and Europe. The next few years is really about scaling, the European operations even further, and then looking to get into other, major global markets like Australia. And at some point, seeing how we can make our way into Asia. and other, more institutional markets. For us, what's really most important is to never lose sight of that vision. We don't want to fall prey to what a lot of our competitors end up falling for, like getting too outside of their zone, going too broad, with their service offerings, just trying to do too much that they end up really not being an expert in anything. We're happy to stay in our lane and to be proud to be, a specialist in a very niche industry because we're an industry expert, and that's fine. We don't need to do everything. There's a big enough market in what we do, and we want to infiltrate that and penetrate that as much as possible on a global geographic scale versus going horizontal and going wider into areas where we don't have that same expertise and we really can't build that same, track record by going so broad that we're just falling out of, our lane. And so that's really, for us, we want to be the best sale-leaseback advisory firm, and we want to do it globally.
That's awesome. And thank you for highlighting that. That's so important. Obviously, you can be really efficient and be really good at what you do, being very limited in that space versus trying to go wide, as you mentioned previously. So I appreciate that. And Chelsea, it was such a pleasure having you on this evening, and I look forward to speaking with you real soon.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Bye for now.